You walk into a room. Nothing dramatic happens. No one turns to stare. No announcement marks your arrival. Conversations continue. Chairs scrape softly against the floor. Someone laughs across the space. Everything appears ordinary, and yet, within seconds, something invisible begins. Your mind starts measuring. You notice who seems confident, who speaks loudly, who others listen to. You compare clothes, posture, attractiveness, intelligence, success, without consciously choosing to do so. You begin assigning positions above you, equal to you. Below you, a silent ranking system activates, and almost instantly, your behavior changes. Your voice adjusts depending on who you believe holds higher status. Your posture tightens or relaxes. You hesitate before speaking, editing thoughts before they even reach your lips. You become smaller or larger, not based on who you are, but based on where you think you stand. This process happens so quickly that it feels natural, inevitable even. But here is the unsettling truth. Nothing in that room objectively determined anyone's worth. No measurable law declared one person superior and another inferior. The hierarchy existed almost entirely inside perception, yet its effects are real. Some people seem to command respect effortlessly. Others fade into the background despite possessing equal intelligence, creativity, or potential. We often assume this difference comes from personality, talent, or upbringing. But look closer, and a deeper possibility emerges. Confidence may not be a trait. It may be a decision about reality itself. From childhood, we are trained to locate our value externally. Grades rank students. Followers rank popularity. Salaries rank importance. Titles rank authority. Every system quietly teaches the same lesson. Your worth exists somewhere outside you, waiting to be confirmed by comparison. And so we learn to look outward before looking inward. Approval begins to feel like oxygen. Recognition becomes proof of existence. Without validation, doubt creeps in, not because we lack ability, but because we have been conditioned to believe self-worth must be granted by others. But pause for a moment and ask a dangerous question. Who decided someone else is better than you? Not more skilled in a specific task that is measurable, not more experience that can be learned, but fundamentally better as a human being. Where was that judgment written? Why does the opinion of strangers hold such psychological authority over our internal state? Why can a single dismissive glance alter confidence built over years? And why does inferiority feel so real, even when no objective evidence exists? The answer may be uncomfortable. Inferiority is rarely discovered. It is installed. Modern society runs on comparison. Advertising thrives by convincing you that you are incomplete. Social media presents curated perfection designed to trigger inadequacy. Professional environments subtly reward those who project certainty, regardless of competence. Over time, comparison stops feeling like an activity and becomes an identity. You stop asking, "What do I think?" and begin asking, "Where do I rank?" This invisible hierarchy governs decisions, relationships, ambitions, and even dreams. Many people never attempt what they desire, not because they lack ability, but because they have unconsciously accepted a lower position in an imaginary order. And yet, thousands of years ago, in a world far harsher and more uncertain than ours, a group of thinkers arrived at a radical conclusion. Believed psychological inferiority itself was an illusion. The ancient Stoics. discovered a mental framework capable of dismantling the hierarchy entirely, not by elevating oneself above others, but by questioning the very idea that human worth could be ranked at all. Their insight leads to a question that changes everything. What if confidence was never something you gained, but something you stopped surrendering? Long before modern psychology attempted to explain confidence, before self-help ministries promised transformation, and before algorithms learned how to manipulate attention, there existed a philosophy born in instability, a system not designed for comfort, but for survival of the mind. Imagine the Roman world nearly 2,000 years ago. Crowded streets filled with merchants and soldiers. Political conspiracies unfolding behind marble walls. Public executions used as entertainment. Empires expanding violently while uncertainty governed everyday life. Wealth could disappear overnight. Power shifted quickly. Exile, betrayal, and death were constant possibilities. It was not a peaceful era searching for abstract wisdom. It was a chaotic civilization searching for psychological stability, and within that chaos, Stoicism emerged. But the Stoics were not merely philosophers debating ideas in quiet academies. They were individuals confronting the harshest realities imaginable. Some lived as slaves. Some ruled empires. Some advised tyrants while knowing their lives could end with a single political decision. Yet despite radically different social positions, they arrived at the same conclusion. Inner freedom does not depend on external circumstance. Stoicism, at its core, was not a philosophy about thinking differently. It was a psychological technology, a method for protecting the human mind from forces it could not control. The Stoics began with a simple but revolutionary distinction. There are things within your control, and things outside your control. Within your control exist your judgments, choices, actions, and responses. Outside your control exist reputation, status, wealth, other people's opinions, and the unpredictable movements of fate. This division seems obvious at first glance, yet its implications are devastating to the idea of hierarchy. Because once you recognize that status and approval belong entirely outside your control, comparison loses its foundation. You cannot control how others rank you. Therefore, basing your worth on ranking guarantees psychological instability. One of the most powerful voices of this philosophy was Epictetus, a man born into slavery. He owned nothing. He possessed no social status. His body itself belonged to another person. By every external measure, he stood at the bottom of society's hierarchy. And yet, Epictetus taught something radical. No one could enslave his mind without his permission. He argued that suffering does not come from events themselves, but from judgments about those events. Insult, poverty, or rejection only gain power when we interpret them as diminishing our value. Remove that interpretation, and external conditions lose their authority over identity. This idea was dangerous because it relocated power inward. At the opposite end of society stood Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, arguably the most powerful man in the known world. Armies obeyed him. Nations feared him. His decisions shaped history itself. Yet in his private writings, he reminded himself daily that fame was temporary, praise unreliable, and superiority meaningless. He wrote not as a ruler asserting dominance, but as a human attempting to remain humble within overwhelming power. He warned himself against believing he was greater than others simply because of position. To Marcus Aurelius, authority was a responsibility, not proof of worth. Then there was Seneca, wealthy, influential, and deeply embedded within Roman politics. Unlike Epictetus, he experienced privilege and luxury, yet he repeatedly warned that wealth creates an illusion of importance. The more society praises status, the more fragile identity becomes, because it depends on forces that can vanish instantly, across slave, emperor, and aristocrat. A strange pattern appeared. Those who understood power most deeply rejected the idea of superiority altogether. They saw hierarchy as a social arrangement, useful for organizing roles but meaningless for defining human value. A general may command soldiers, a teacher may guide students, a ruler may govern citizens, but none possess greater intrinsic worth as human beings. The Stoics realized something modern. Culture often forgets. Roles are temporary. Character is internal. If worth depends on external position, then identity becomes hostage to change. Lose status, and you lose yourself. But if worth depends on how you think and act, something entirely within your control, then no external force can truly diminish you. This perspective dissolves comparison at its root, not by convincing yourself you are better than others, but by recognizing that comparison measures the wrong thing entirely. You are not competing in existence. You are responsible only for the quality of your own reasoning and actions. This is why Stoicism feels both empowering and unsettling. It removes excuses along with insecurity. If others are not above you, they are also not responsible for your authority. Returns fully to the individual. And this leads to an uncomfortable question. If status does not define value, then what does? The Stoics answered with quiet clarity: virtue, the consistent effort to act with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. Not achievements, not admiration, not dominance over others, but alignment between thought and action. In other words, the goal was never to rise above humanity. It was to stand firmly within it. The Stoics did not try to become superior. They removed the concept of superiority itself. If the Stoics were correct, if superiority and inferiority are illusions created by judgment, then an uncomfortable question follows: why do feelings of inadequacy appear so naturally? Why does self-doubt feel automatic, almost biological, as if it were built into human nature itself? The answer lies not only in philosophy, but in psychology and in the systems modern society has constructed around human attention and behavior. Human beings are social creatures before they are rational ones. For most of evolutionary history, survival depended entirely on belonging to a group. Isolation meant vulnerability. Rejection often meant death. As a result, the human brain evolved to treat social standing as a matter of survival rather than preference. Acceptance feels safe. Exclusion feels dangerous. Modern neuroscience shows that social rejection activates many of the same neural pathways as physical pain. The brain does not fully distinguish between being wounded and being excluded. Both signal threat. This ancient survival mechanism once helped humans cooperate. Today, it has become one of the most powerful tools for psychological manipulation. Modern environments continuously stimulate comparison because comparison captures attention. And attention, in the modern world, is currency. Advertising operates on a simple psychological formula. First create insecurity, then offer relief. A person satisfied with themselves is difficult to sell to. But a person made aware of perceived flaws becomes motivated to purchase solutions. Beauty standards shift constantly, not because humanity evolves so quickly, but because dissatisfaction drives consumption. You are shown ideal bodies, ideal lifestyles, ideal success, not as inspiration, but as contrast. The unspoken message repeats endlessly: you are not enough yet. Social media intensifies this mechanism exponentially. For the first time in history, individuals compare themselves not with a small tribe of peers, but with millions of carefully curated identities. People display highlights while hiding struggles, creating an illusion of universal success. The mind interprets these images literally. It does not instinctively account for editing, selection bias, or performance. Instead, it concludes, everyone else is advancing faster than me. This creates what psychologists call social comparison theory, the tendency to evaluate ourselves by measuring against others. While comparison can sometimes motivate improvement, constant exposure transforms it into chronic dissatisfaction. Soon, identity becomes reactive rather than self-directed. Status anxiety emerges, the persistent fear of being perceived as inferior. Individuals begin monitoring how they appear rather than how they live. Decisions shift from internal values to external impressions. Even education systems, designed to cultivate growth, often reinforce hierarchy unintentionally. Students are ranked new. Intelligence becomes associated with performance metrics. Success becomes something validated by authority rather than discovered internally. Over time, self-trust weakens. People begin waiting for permission to believe in themselves. Permission from grades, from employers, from audiences, from strangers online. This creates what can be described as external validation. Addiction, a psychological dependency on approval signals. Praise produces temporary confidence. Criticism produces disproportionate collapse. Identity fluctuates according to feedback rather than conviction. And the tragedy is that most individuals never notice the transfer of authority taking place. Consider the employee sitting in a meeting, holding an idea that could genuinely improve the discussion. They remain silent, not because the idea lacks value, but because they unconsciously rank others as more qualified to speak. The hierarchy exists entirely in perception, yet it determines behavior. Or the student who knows the correct answer but avoids raising their hand, fearing embarrassment more than valuing truth. Or the creator who delays sharing their work for years, waiting to feel ready. Unaware that readiness often means freedom from imagined judgment rather than improvement in ability. In each case, the individual surrenders internal authority to an invisible audience. Confidence becomes conditional. Action becomes delayed. Potential remains unrealized, and slowly, inferiority begins to feel like evidence rather than conditioning. But here lies the crucial insight. Repeated psychological experiences create familiarity, not truth. Just because self-doubt feels real does not mean it reflects reality. The brain learns patterns through repetition. If comparison is constant, insecurity becomes predictable. If approval determines emotional stability, dependence forms naturally. Inferiority is rarely discovered through objective measurement, it is trained through environmenta. Person exposed to continuous comparison will almost inevitably question their worth. Not because they lack value, but because the system surrounding them rewards self. Insecure individuals are easier to influence, easier to market to, easier to control socially. This does not require conspiracy in the dramatic sense. It emerges organically from incentives. Platforms profit from engagement. Engagement increases through emotional stimulation. Few emotions drive attention more effectively than inadequacy and desire. And so the cycle sustains itself. People search endlessly for confidence, unaware that the search itself reinforces the belief that confidence must be earned externally. The Stoics recognized this psychological trap long before modern psychology gave it terminology. They understood that attempting to improve self-image within a comparison-based system only strengthens the system itself. Trying to feel superior still accepts hierarchy as real. Trying to impress still grants authority to observers. Trying to win comparison still keeps identity dependent on outcomes beyond control. Their solution was far more radical, not improving self-image, but redefining identity entirely. Stoicism does not ask you to think more highly of yourself. It asks you to stop measuring yourself through external standards at first glance. The phrase sounds almost provocative. Act as if you are the best. In a world already saturated with ego and self-promotion, it can seem like an invitation to arrogance. It appears to encourage superiority, dominance, or inflated self-belief. But the Stoic interpretation points in the opposite direction entirely to the Stoics. Acting as if you are the best does not mean believing you are greater than others. It means refusing to believe you are lesser. It is not an elevation above humanity, but a return to equality within it. The idea begins with a simple observation. Human beings rarely behave according to who they truly are. Instead, they behave according to who they believe they are allowed to be. A person who feels inferior speaks cautiously. A person who feels uncertain hesitates. A person who assumes others hold greater authority unconsciously withdraws. Over time, behavior reinforces belief. The more one acts small, the more smallness feels true. Stoicism interrupts this cycle through action rather than affirmation. The Stoics did not teach endless positive thinking or attempts to convince oneself of greatness. They proposed a mental experiment. Behave as a rational, self-respecting human being would behave regardless of emotion, doubt, or external approval. In other words, act first. Understanding follows later. Modern psychology increasingly confirms what the Stoics practiced intuitively. Behavior shapes identity faster than belief. Waiting to feel confident before acting creates paralysis because confidence itself emerges from repeated action. The brain learns certainty through evidence generated by experience, not through internal persuasion. Confidence is not the cause of courageous behavior. It is the result. Consider how differently life unfolds when this principle is applied. Walking into uncertainty with calm posture does not require certainty about outcomes. It requires acceptance that outcomes are not fully controllable anyway. Speaking clearly does not demand absolute knowledge. It demands respect for one's capacity to reason. Making decisions without excessive apology does not imply perfection. It reflects ownership of choice. Each action communicates a message to the mind. I am permitted to exist fully. This is the Stoic meaning behind acting as if you are the best. Not superior, but internally authorized. The Stoics believed all humans share one defining feature: rational nature. Every person possesses the capacity to think, choose, and act according to reason. Because this capacity exists universally. No individual holds greater intrinsic worth than another. Differences in skill, wealth, or recognition do not alter this fundamental equality. When you act as if you are beneath others, you deny this shared nature. When you act with grounded self-respect, you acknowledge it. This shift produces a powerful psychological effect. Much anxiety arises not from difficulty itself, but from perceived hierarchy. Fear intensifies when someone believes another person holds higher existential value. A boss, an expert, an audience, or even strangers. The mind exaggerates consequences because it assumes judgment carries ultimate authority. But the moment hierarchy dissolves, anxiety weakens. If no one stands above you in human worth, then interaction becomes cooperation rather than evaluation. Conversations transform from performances into exchanges. Mistakes become learning experiences. Instead of identity threats, the nervous system relaxes because survival is no longer psychologically at stake. This explains why individuals who embody quiet confidence often appear calm even under pressure. They are not convinced of superiority. They are simply free from inferiority. There is an important distinction here. One, the Stoics emphasized repeatedly: arrogance seeks dominance. It depends on comparison and requires others to appear smaller. Arrogant confidence is fragile because it must constantly defend its position. Any challenge becomes a threat. Stoic confidence removes hierarchy altogether. It does not need validation because it does not compete for existential rank. It allows others to succeed without feeling diminished. It accepts ignorance without shame. It speaks without aggression and listens without submission. It is stable because it rests on internal principles rather than external reactions. Imagine entering a room without silently ranking yourself against others. Imagine speaking because you have something meaningful to say, not because you believe you must prove intelligence. Imagine making decisions guided by reason rather than approval. Nothing external changes, yet experience transforms completely. This is why the Stoics framed confidence as practice rather than personality. You do not wait until fear disappears. You act according to reason despite fear. Over time, the mind updates its expectations. Situations once perceived as threatening become ordinary. Identity shifts gradually, almost quietly. You begin to notice that respect often follows those who do not chase it. Others respond differently, not because you demanded recognition, but because you stopped signaling uncertainty about your own legitimacy. Paradoxically, acting with calm equality often generates the very confidence people spend years trying to acquire indirectly. Yet, if this mindset is so liberating, a deeper question arises. Why does it feel so difficult to adopt today? Why does acting with simple self-respect feel almost rebellious in the modern world? If acting with self-respect is so simple in principle, why do so few people live this way? Why does speaking honestly feel risky? Why does expressing ambition feel uncomfortable? Why does the possibility of judgment carry such disproportionate emotional weight? The answer lies in one of the oldest fears embedded within the human mind: the fear of social rejection. For most of human history, survival depended entirely on belonging to a tribe. Early humans could not survive alone. Isolation meant exposure to predators, starvation, and vulnerability. Acceptance ensured protection. Rejection threatened existence itself. Over thousands of generations, the brain adapted accordingly. It learned to interpret social approval as safety and social disapproval as danger. Being excluded triggered alarm systems designed to preserve life. This mechanism was once rational, but evolution moves slowly, while civilization changes rapidly. The modern world has removed many physical dangers of rejection, yet the emotional circuitry remains intact. Today, embarrassment does not lead to exile into the wilderness, yet the nervous system reacts as if it might. A critical comment online can trigger anxiety similar to physical threat. Public mistakes feel catastrophic, even when consequences are minimal. The fear is ancient. The environment is new, and so people begin building invisible prisons around themselves. They censor ideas before sharing them, imagining criticism that may never come. They soften opinions to avoid disagreement. They hide personality traits that feel unconventional. Creativity remains unpublished. Ambitions shrink into privately acceptable dreams. Life becomes a performance carefully edited for approval. This self-censorship rarely feels like fear. It disguises itself as politeness, realism, or preparation. People tell themselves they are waiting for the right moment, more knowledge, or greater confidence. But often, what they are truly waiting for is immunity from judgment, something that never arrives. The result is subtle but profound. Limitation. Entire identities remain unexplored because individuals unconsciously prioritize acceptance over authenticity. They shape themselves according to imagined expectations rather than internal reasoning. The Stoics identified this psychological trap long before modern sociology described conformity. They argued that fear of opinion is one of the most destructive forms of dependency because it grants strangers authority over one's inner life. If your peace depends on approval, your peace belongs to others. Stoicism responds with a radical reframing. Other people's opinions exist outside your control. Therefore, attaching identity to them guarantees instability. This idea does not deny the social nature of humans. Reputation has practical consequences. Cooperation matters. But the Stoics insisted on distinguishing usefulness from identity. Opinions may influence circumstances, but they cannot define worth unless allowed to do so. Marcus Aurelius reflected frequently on reputation in his private writings. Despite ruling an empire, he reminded himself that praise and criticism fade quickly. Those who admired him would soon die. Those who judged him harshly would also disappear. Even memory itself would eventually dissolve. He asked himself a question both humbling and liberating. Why fear the judgment of people who themselves struggle with uncertainty, bias, and mortality? The perspective shifts when viewed across time. Consider an embarrassment that once felt overwhelming, a social mistake, an awkward moment, a failed attempt. Years later, its emotional intensity fades. Often, others barely remember it at all. Extend that timeline further. In 100 years, nearly everyone alive today will be gone. Conversations, reputations, and opinions that feel urgent now will vanish into history's silence. The moments we fear most intensely rarely survive even a generation. Yet people organize entire lives around avoiding temporary discomfort. The tragedy is not that individuals fail publicly. The tragedy is that many never attempt what matters because they imagine constant observers evaluating their every move. Most lives are constrained not by real criticism, but by imaginary audiences. The mind constructs watchers everywhere, colleagues judging competence, strangers judging appearance, society judging success. These observers exist largely as projections, yet their influence feels undeniable. Stoicism dismantles this illusion by returning focus to what remains truly yours: intention and action. You cannot control how your work is received. You cannot guarantee admiration. You cannot prevent misunderstanding. But you can control whether you act according to reason and integrity. When judgment loses its authority, something unexpected happens. Energy, once spent managing perception, becomes available for living. Creativity emerges without constant self-monitoring. Conversations become genuine rather than strategic. Decisions align with values rather than fear. Freedom does not arrive dramatically. It appears quietly, as the absence of psychological pressure. You begin to realize that the prison was never external. The bars were expectations internalized over years of comparison and fear. And once judgment no longer determines identity, a new possibility opens. One the Stoics believed was the beginning of true independence. If judgment loses power, something unexpected appears. Freedom. Freedom from judgment is not the end of the Stoic journey. It is only the beginning. Once a person understands that worth cannot be granted or removed by others, a deeper question emerges. How does one actually live this truth? Insight alone rarely transforms behavior. Knowing something intellectually does not immediately dissolve years of conditioning. The mind may agree with philosophy while emotion continues to react according to old patterns. The Stoics understood this gap between understanding and embodiment. Their philosophy was never meant to remain theoretical. It was designed as daily training, a gradual reshaping of perception through practice. Transformation in Stoic thought happens step by step. The first practice was negative visualization. At first, this sounds pessimistic, even unsettling. Instead of imagining success, Stoics deliberately imagined loss, losing status, comfort, possessions, or approval. They reflected on the temporary nature of everything they valued. But the purpose was not despair. It was liberation. By mentally rehearsing loss, they weakened fear's grip. If you accept internally that praise may disappear, criticism loses its power. If comfort is understood as temporary, discomfort becomes less threatening. Gratitude increases because nothing feels permanently guaranteed. Modern psychology mirrors this idea through exposure therapy. Repeated mental confrontation reduces emotional sensitivity. The Stoics practiced this centuries earlier, training the mind to remain steady regardless of circumstance. The second practice involved self-dialogue, a disciplined conversation with one's own thoughts. Stoics believed emotions often arise from unchecked interpretations rather than events themselves. Therefore, they examined reactions carefully. When anxiety appeared, they asked, "Is this within my control?" When anger surfaced, they asked, "Am I reacting to reality or to expectation?" This internal questioning interrupted automatic emotional responses. Over time, the individual becomes less reactive and more deliberate. Instead of being pulled by every opinion or outcome, the mind develops space between stimulus and response. In that space, freedom grows. Another essential principle was amor fati, the acceptance, even love, of fate. Rather than resisting events beyond control, Stoics practiced alignment with reality itself. Whatever happens becomes material for growth rather than evidence of injustice. This perspective transforms adversity. Failure becomes instruction. Rejection becomes redirection. Difficulty becomes training. The individual stops asking, why is this happening to me? And begins asking, how can I use this? Such acceptance does not eliminate effort or ambition. It removes resentment toward uncontrollable outcomes. Energy once spent resisting reality becomes available for meaningful action. Then comes one of the most misunderstood Stoic practices: voluntary discomfort. Stoics occasionally chose mild hardship, intentionally cold baths, simple meals, minimal possessions, not as punishment, but as preparation. By experiencing discomfort willingly, they proved to themselves that will did not depend on luxury or approval. Fear shrinks when uncertainty becomes familiar. A person who knows they can endure discomfort becomes psychologically difficult to control. Threats lose influence because dependency decreases. Together, these practices produce a gradual transformation. At first, insecurity dominates. The individual constantly monitors how they appear, interpreting every reaction as judgment. Confidence fluctuates with circumstances. Then neutrality emerges. External events still occur, but emotional reactions soften. Praise feels pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism feels uncomfortable, but not devastating. Eventually, something quieter develops, a form of authority that does not demand recognition. Real confidence, in the Stoic sense, is almost invisible. It is not loud. It does not seek attention. It does not attempt to dominate conversations or prove intelligence. Instead, it appears as calm presence, grounded, attentive, and difficult to intimidate. Such individuals move through environments without psychological submission or aggression. They listen fully because they are not defending identity. They speak clearly because they are not seeking approval. Their composure signals stability rather than superiority. And here a paradox emerges. The less a person tries to impress others, the more respect they often receive. Humans instinctively trust those who appear internally secure. Calm certainty suggests independence from manipulation. People sense when someone is not desperately negotiating for validation. History and modern life offer countless examples. Certain leaders, thinkers, and creators command attention not through forceful charisma but through quiet conviction. Their presence feels grounded because it does not fluctuate with praise or criticism. They are not immune to emotion. They simply are not governed by it. This state can be described as becoming internally untouchable, not invulnerable, but stable. External events continue to influence circumstances, yet they no longer define identity. The individual no longer asks, "How do I appear?" but instead, "Am I acting according to my principles?" This shift marks the true Stoic transformation. Ironically, once approval is no longer pursued, relationships often improve. Conversations become authentic. Creativity becomes fearless. Decisions become clearer because they originate internally rather than socially. Life simplifies, but Stoicism does not end with empowerment alone. The philosophy includes a warning, one final danger that appears precisely at the moment confidence begins to solidify, because the mind, once freed from inferiority, faces a new temptation. And that temptation is far more subtle than fear. Every powerful idea carries a hidden risk of misunderstanding. The moment a person begins freeing themselves from inferiority, another danger quietly appears, one far less obvious than fear, yet equally destructive. Confidence, if misunderstood, can slowly transform into ego. An ego, unlike insecurity, disguises itself as strength. Stoicism anticipated this problem long before modern psychology described narcissism or self. The Stoics knew that removing feelings of inferiority could tempt individuals to swing toward the opposite extreme, believing not that all humans are equal, but that they themselves are superior. This is where the philosophy draws a sharp and essential distinction. Stoic confidence is rooted in equality. Ego is rooted in comparison. The ego does not eliminate hierarchy. It simply attempts to climb higher within it. Instead of feeling smaller than others, the ego seeks reassurance by feeling larger. It replaces insecurity with dominance, humility with certainty, curiosity with self-protection. At first, this shift can feel empowering. The individual speaks boldly, dismisses criticism, and appears unshaken. But beneath the surface, ego remains dependent on external validation. Only because superiority requires comparison to exist. If you believe you are better than others, your identity depends on maintaining that belief. Someone more skilled, more knowledgeable, or more successful becomes a threat. Criticism feels intolerable because it challenges the image carefully constructed to avoid vulnerability. Ironically, ego recreates the same psychological prison as inferiority, just from the opposite direction. The Stoics rejected both extremes. They argued that every human being shares a mixture of strengths and ignorance. One person may excel intellectually yet struggle emotionally. Another may possess wisdom in relationships but lack technical skill. No individual embodies perfection across all domains. Therefore, ranking entire human beings becomes irrational. You can compare abilities in specific contexts, but not intrinsic worth. A musician may surpass a philosopher in art. A philosopher may surpass a general in strategy. A general may surpass both in courage under pressure. Each comparison shifts depending on circumstance. Hierarchy dissolves under honest examination. Stoic humility emerges from this realization. It is not self-deprecation, nor is it false modesty. It is clarity about the limits of control. You control effort, intention, and judgment, but outcomes depend on countless external variables: timing, environment, opportunity, and chance. Success, therefore, cannot serve as proof of superiority. Failure cannot serve as proof of inferiority. Both exist partly beyond individual control. This understanding protects the mind from ego's illusion when achievements occur. Gratitude replaces arrogance because outcomes are recognized as collaborative products of effort and circumstance. When setbacks occur, learning replaces shame because identity was never tied solely to results. The Stoic constantly returns to self-examination, not asking, "Am I better than others?" but asking, "Am I acting according to reason and virtue?" This question stabilizes confidence because it removes comparison entirely. Growth becomes internal rather than competitive. Improvement becomes continuous rather than defensive. True strength in Stoic philosophy requires ongoing humility. The mind must remain open to correction, aware of bias, and willing to acknowledge ignorance. Without this vigilance, confidence slowly hardens into delusion. History repeatedly shows how unchecked ego leads individuals, leaders, thinkers, and institutions toward collapse. Certainty without reflection blinds judgment. Superiority without humility isolates individuals from truth. The Stoics sought a middle path. Unwavering self-respect combined with constant self-questioning. Confidence, without arrogance, strength, without domination, authority, without ego. And this leads to the ultimate insight toward which Stoicism quietly points. The goal was never to become the best, it was to realize that the hierarchy itself was never real at all. Imagine once again entering a room filled with strangers. At first, nothing appears different. Conversations continue. People laugh, speak confidently, exchange opinions. Some seem more successful, more intelligent, more composed. The same subtle instinct arises, the impulse to measure yourself against them, to silently calculate where you belong within an invisible hierarchy. But now something has changed. You notice the comparison beginning, and for the first time, you recognize it as a habit rather than a truth. You see how quickly the mind assigns status without evidence, how it interprets confidence as superiority, recognition as worth, visibility as value. You observe the old reflex, attempting to rank human beings as if existence itself were a competition, and then the realization settles. Quietly, no one in the room exists above you, not because you are greater, but because hierarchy was never real in the way you once believed. Status shifts constantly. The admired become forgotten. The powerful lose influence. The celebrated fade into memory. History itself is filled with names once considered untouchable, now reduced to footnotes or silence. Opinions are even more fragile. What one generation praises, another criticizes. What one group admires, another dismisses. Reputation moves like weather, changing direction without warning or permanence. To build identity upon such instability is to stand on moving ground. The Stoics understood this deeply. They saw that comparison survives only through agreement. The moment you stop accepting external ranking as a measure of worth, its psychological power dissolves. You still recognize skill. You still respect experience. You still learn from others. But admiration no longer transforms into submission. Difference no longer becomes inferiority. What remains is something simpler and stronger: character, action, choice. These are the only elements fully yours. Not how loudly you are praised, not how widely you are known, not how others interpret your existence, but how you think, how you act, and how consistently you live according to reason. The fear that once followed you begins to fade. Conversations feel lighter because nothing essential is at risk. Mistakes lose their sting because they no longer threaten identity. Success feels meaningful without becoming addictive. You move through life without psychological submission, not defensive, not arrogant, simply grounded. You speak when you have something to say. You remain silent when silence is wiser. You pursue goals without needing them to validate your existence. You allow others their strengths without feeling diminished by them, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, life becomes quieter inside. The endless internal comparison, the background noise present for so many years, loses its urgency. Attention returns to the present moment rather than imagined judgment. This is the Stoic revelation. Acting as if you are the best was never about pretending to be superior. It was about refusing to abandon your inherent dignity. It was about recognizing that worth was never something awarded by society, but something expressed through conduct. Nothing external needed to change because the hierarchy existed only in perception. The moment you stop measuring yourself against others, effort becomes authentic. Relationships become equal. decisions become clear, and perhaps greatest freedom emerges from a realization so simple it almost feels obvious. No one was ever standing above you, only beside you. The moment you stop measuring yourself against others is the moment you become impossible to diminish.